The wolf doesn't concern himself with the opinion of sheep, and that's why they fear him. What's up, Ascenders? We're not here to tick boxes or sugarcoat reality. This isn't a safe space for shallow thinkers. It's a vault for those who see the world differently. For the few who don't just follow, they disrupt. Today, we're cracking open a vault that's been sealed too long. You've heard of Sigma males, those who walk alone, thrive in solitude, and don't need permission to dominate their lane. But what nobody talks about is why the world tries to suppress them, why they're targeted, not because they're weak, but because they are the antivirus in a system built on dependency. This video isn't another cliché take on Sigma traits. We're diving deeper into the 12 unspoken reasons why Sigma males are constantly challenged, questioned, and even feared. From cultural rejection to psychological warfare, you're about to understand why the lone wolf makes the entire forest uneasy. So if you're tired of surface-level content, if you want substance that cuts clean and goes deep, subscribe, join the Ascenders. This is Sigma Ascends, and we don't just watch, we rise. Let's break silence with truth. 1. Echo chamber disruptors. Sigma males are walking disruptions to the status quo. In a world dominated by groupthink, emotional echo chambers, and herd mentality, a man who thinks for himself becomes an unintentional antagonist. Society is designed to reward consensus. The news, education, entertainment, all funnel toward one conclusion. Follow the narrative, don't challenge it. But Sigmas, they're built differently. They ask questions no one wants to answer. They observe what others are too distracted to see. They're not trying to be rebels. Their clarity is rebellion enough. This makes them incredibly uncomfortable to have around. In workspaces, they notice manipulation tactics. In friendships, they call out subtle hypocrisies. In systems, they see the gears turning behind fake smiles and polished scripts. The echo chamber doesn't want silence, it wants agreement. And when it doesn't get it, it turns hostile. Sigmas don't conform just to fit in, and that's seen as aggression in a world that equates politeness with obedience. Their refusal to validate shallow ideas or virtue signaling makes them targets of gossip, exclusion, or even institutional pushback. Here's the deeper truth. The echo chamber survives by silencing the outliers. But Sigma males don't get loud. They get focused. They don't argue. They act. And that silence becomes thunder in a world built on empty noise. 2. Immunity to manipulation scripts. Most people are walking triggers, easily guilted, swayed by praise, or baited by flattery. But Sigma males, they move outside the manipulation playbook. They've studied the scripts, the corporate charm, the dating psychology tricks, the fear-panic narratives, and they don't fall for them. Not because they're cold, but because they're aware. You can't sell identity to someone who's already built theirs. You can't guilt someone who doesn't need approval. You can't trick someone who's already thought 10 steps ahead. This resistance to manipulation makes them unmarketable, a threat to industries built on selling dreams and insecurities. That's why Sigma males often get labeled as emotionally distant or uncooperative. It's not that they lack emotion, it's that they don't leak it for exploitation. And the moment you can't be easily controlled, you become a problem. People try to test you, push your buttons, or box you in. When they fail, frustration turns into targeting. Because the system isn't designed to adapt to people it can't predict. Sigmas understand one critical law. Whoever controls your emotions controls your actions. So they guard their energy like a fortress. They move with calculation, not impulse. They analyze before reacting, and in doing so, they become impossible to puppeteer. It's not arrogance, it's strategic self-sovereignty. And to the manipulators, that's unforgivable. 3. The quiet challenge to power structures. Sigma males don't chase titles, applause, or staged influence, and ironically, that makes them a threat to every established power structure that thrives on hierarchy. While others clamor for visibility and climb the social ladder, Sigmas build sideways, independently. They don't challenge the system head-on. They do something more subversive. They thrive outside it. That's unsettling to anyone who spent years begging for seats at the table. Sigmas don't wait for invitations. They make their own tables, or skip the table entirely and eat alone with satisfaction. In corporations, this shows up as insubordination masked in competence. They get results, but they don't play politics. They don't schmooze or submit. This threatens bosses who built their status on control, not skill. In social groups, they don't worship influencers or follow cliques. They think independently and speak when needed. This quiet power disarms people used to dominating through noise. Their autonomy becomes a mirror for those who tied their worth to hierarchy. And instead of being inspired, many feel exposed. That's why Sigmas aren't just ignored. They're often sabotaged or isolated. But here's the twist. Sigma males don't seek validation because they've already validated themselves, and in doing so, they upend the illusion that power requires permission. They prove that true strength doesn't shout, it simply exists, unbothered and undeniable. 4. Refusal to submit to alpha-beta games. In today's society, masculinity is often reduced to a false binary, alpha or beta. Alphas dominate, betas submit. But Sigma males? They exit the game entirely. They don't assert dominance to prove themselves, nor do they chase approval. They operate outside the pecking order. That refusal to participate infuriates both sides. Alpha types see them as disrespectful, because Sigmas don't kneel or compete. Betas envy their confidence, because Sigmas don't seek group protection. This puts the Sigma in a strange space, isolated by design, yet constantly watched. Why? Because their calm presence disrupts the dominance hierarchy. In male-dominated spaces, they don't puff their chests. They observe, they plan, they act when necessary. And that quiet confidence shatters the myth that power must be loud. This isn't about ego. It's about opting out of the theater. While others are acting out dominant scripts, Sigmas are rewriting their own. They don't join the play, they change the venue. It also frustrates others in social or romantic dynamics. Sigma males don't chase, beg, or prove. They attract by being whole on their own. And that breaks the game, because the game requires players. The world wants you to pick a side. The Sigma walks a third path, alone, clear, and undefeated. 5. Control, denial, protocol. The world runs on prediction. It needs to categorize you, monitor you, decode you, because once you're predictable, you're controllable. But Sigma males, they're off the radar. They're not mysterious for the sake of it. They're simply unavailable to be tracked. Their routines don't match templates. Their choices don't come from trends. Their priorities don't follow social programming. That's why they trigger so much resistance. People want access. They want to analyze you, predict your next move, get inside your rhythm. Sigmas, by nature, deny access without explanation. And here's the part that really burns. You can't guilt them for it. They don't feel pressure to explain themselves. They don't owe transparency to people who haven't earned trust. This level of boundary is rare, and it intimidates the masses. In relationships, this looks like emotional sovereignty. No codependency, no neediness, no emotional leakage. Sigmas manage themselves, which creates friction in a culture where vulnerability is often weaponized. In work environments, their unpredictability translates to independence. They don't wait for instructions, they self-direct. That throws off bosses who want to micromanage or teammates who need constant affirmation. But here's what most don't realize. Control isn't about dominance anymore. It's about data. If they can't track what you like, fear, want, or post, They can't sell you anything, and they can't threaten you with loss. Sigmas reject the surveillance culture by simply not feeding it. No oversharing, no loud opinions, just pure, consistent, strategic motion. They aren't off the grid because they fear the system. They're off the grid because they've seen the system and opted out on purpose. 6. Invisible threat to mediocrity. Mediocrity is comfortable. It loves the average. It rewards the safe. It survives by surrounding itself with others who won't rise too high or fall too far. Sigmas. They don't announce excellence. They embody it. And that makes them a silent threat. They're not posting every win. They're not seeking permission to improve. They build in the dark and emerge with results. That progress, made without applause, terrifies people still waiting for validation to begin. This triggers envy, not because Sigmas brag, but because they prove it's possible to rise without being chosen, that you can grow without begging for it, that you can evolve without external permission. Mediocre people can forgive loud success. They'll even cheer for it if it feels earned. But quiet, unbothered excellence, that's insulting to someone who's spent years explaining why they haven't started yet. In friendships, Sigmas become too serious, too focused, too distant. In truth, they're just not interested in wasting time, and people who live for distraction hate that. In workspaces, they're the ones who produce silently while others politic and perform. That efficiency makes others feel exposed, not because the Sigma is trying to, but because his presence removes excuses. Here's the core of it. Mediocrity needs company. Sigma males refuse the invitation. They don't mock the mediocre. They simply leave the room. And that's more offensive than any insult. They don't compete. They don't flex. They ascend quietly. And that's what scares people the most. 7. Digital ghosts in a hyper-visible age. We live in an age where visibility is currency. If you don't post it, it didn't happen. If you don't show your grind, are you even grinding? Sigma males break this logic by living real and sharing little. They're digital ghosts, hard to find, impossible to decode, and uninterested in broadcasting their lives. And in a culture addicted to attention, that makes them feel dangerous. Why? Because they're not playing the dopamine game. No validation loops, no like-for-like behavior, no fear of missing out. Sigmas aren't anti-social, they're post-social. They've seen the game. They know the trade-off. Visibility invites control. While others overshare for likes, they preserve power through privacy. They don't hide. They select. They don't isolate. They protect peace. People who depend on attention can't understand this. They see silence as arrogance. They call mystery rudeness. But Sigmas aren't rejecting people. They're rejecting performance. This triggers platforms, companies, even governments, because control relies on data. The less you post, the less you reveal. And the less you reveal, the harder it is to track, predict, or monetize you. So they'll push you to engage. They'll tempt you with trends. They'll frame withdrawal as antisocial or dysfunctional. But the truth is, withdrawing is strategic, a conscious choice to protect your mind and reclaim your attention. Sigma males use tech. They're not used by it. And in doing so, they violate the attention economy's #1 rule: stay visible. And that's why they're targeted, not for what they say, but for what they refuse to show. 8. Failure to comply with victim culture. Modern culture thrives on identity built through struggle. Victimhood, while often real, has also become a currency, traded for attention, sympathy, and social power. Sigma males, they reject it entirely. They don't downplay hardship, but they refuse to build identity from it. They don't use pain to get attention. They use it to get sharper, stronger, cleaner. This refusal frustrates people. In today's climate, not playing the victim can be seen as cold, toxic, or out of touch. But Sigmas aren't avoiding pain. They're just refusing to be defined by it. They don't post breakdowns. They don't seek pity. They solve quietly and keep moving. This creates discomfort. People bonded through shared struggle sometimes resent those who break out of it. In groupthink spaces, victimhood is sacred, and anyone who doesn't worship at the altar gets rejected. Sigmas become outsiders, not because they mock pain, but because they process it without the need for applause. That makes them incompatible with emotionally codependent dynamics. They don't need saving. They don't offer dramatic support. They offer strategy, clarity. And that's often the last thing a person drowning in emotion wants. They see pain as fuel, not identity. And this stoicism threatens modern narratives that equate public vulnerability with authenticity. Sigma males believe in ownership, not performance. They transform struggle in silence, and their progress exposes the hidden incentives behind performative suffering. 9. Disruptors of the romance market. Dating isn't just about attraction anymore. It's a marketplace, a digital economy built on swipes, likes, validation loops, and scarcity psychology. Sigma males don't participate the way others do, and that throws the whole system off balance. They don't chase. They don't play into attention dynamics. They don't buy into the idea that self-worth comes from romantic success. They're self-contained, and that's what makes them disruptive. See, the dating economy runs on attention. If men are constantly seeking validation through pursuit, and women are rewarded through being desired, the loop keeps spinning. But a Sigma male opting out? That's a broken cog in the machine. It confuses people, makes them question their value, makes them uncomfortable. Why isn't he chasing? Why isn't he playing the role? Why is he calm when others are desperate? The Sigma's value doesn't depend on external confirmation. He attracts because he doesn't need to, and that unshakable detachment is rare. This shakes up romantic hierarchies. Other men see him as a threat because he doesn't compete in the same arena, and women often don't know how to place him because he's not seeking to be placed. Sigmas don't disrespect love, they just don't build identity around it. That difference makes them immune to the manipulation that often lurks behind romance. They don't fall for games, strategies, or flattery, and that makes them a nightmare for people used to using seduction as leverage. In the romance market, Sigmas are bad for business because they represent freedom in a system built on dependency. 10th, unlicensed philosophers. Sigma males aren't loud thinkers, but they're deep thinkers. They question what most people never even notice. They analyze culture, history, psychology, power, purpose, not as academics, but as independent philosophers with no agenda but clarity. That's why they're often misunderstood or silenced. Because in today's world, philosophy is only allowed if it comes with a brand, a degree, or a platform. Sigmas don't wait for permission to think. They don't recite mantras approved by ideology. They form conclusions after relentless private observation. And that's dangerous to any system that demands group alignment. They're hard to debate because they don't argue to win. They ask questions that cut deeper than most are comfortable going, and often the only way to respond is to discredit them, label them weird, toxic, cold, or even extremist. But they're not extremists, they're free thinkers, and freedom of thought, when not aligned with popular trends, is seen as rebellion. Sigmas don't belong to ideologies, they belong to reality. They don't fight for labels, they seek truth, even if that truth offends the room. In a world where narratives are currency and outrage is monetized, the Sigma's clarity is an economic threat. He won't sell your idea just because it's loud. He won't repost your belief system just because it's popular. His mind is his, and in an age of influence, ownership of thought is the ultimate act of defiance. 11. The threat of self-sufficiency. We live in a world built to make you dependent, on systems, on people, on approval. Independence is framed as arrogance. Self-sufficiency is seen as antisocial. Sigma males break this mold completely. They're not loners, they're self-powered. They learn skills not to impress, but to survive. They chase excellence, not because someone told them to, but because they refuse to be helpless. This terrifies the system. A man who doesn't need saving, fixing, approval, or permission is a man who can't be controlled. Financial systems want consumers. Emotional systems want people who need affirmation. Social systems want members. But Sigma males, they're outsiders by design. They won't wait for support. They'll build alone. They won't beg for love. They'll find peace solo. They won't seek status. They'll create value in silence. That's power, quiet, dangerous, resilient, and systems that rely on compliance and dependency can't survive when men start opting out. This self-sufficiency also scares individuals. In relationships, a Sigma doesn't cling, he doesn't obsess, he supports, but never loses himself. Friends may feel replaced, employers may feel threatened. But what they're really feeling is the presence of someone who doesn't need validation to breathe. Self-sufficiency is not about isolation, it's about internal leadership. And once a man leads himself, no one else can ever fully lead him again. 12. The mirror effect. Sigma males reflect what others are trying to avoid in themselves. Their discipline exposes laziness. Their silence reveals noise. Their focus makes distractions look like addictions. That's why they often trigger people without doing anything at all. They walk into a room and someone suddenly feels insecure, not because the Sigma is better, but because the Sigma represents what that person knows they could be but hasn't become. This is the mirror effect, and it's powerful. The Sigma doesn't judge. He doesn't preach. But his existence is a living confrontation. To people who built excuses instead of habits, to people who settled for attention instead of growth, to people who wanted comfort instead of clarity. He doesn't expose them, he just exists, and that's enough. That's why some people attack. They mock, they question his motives. Why are you so quiet? Why are you always working? Why don't you join us? It's not curiosity, it's projection. Sigmas aren't trying to lead anyone, but they can't help being an example. Their actions whisper what words never could. You could change, but you haven't. And for many, that reflection is too raw, so they try to break the mirror instead of facing what it reveals. Ascenders, the noise is loud, but silence is undefeated. If you've made it this far, you already know. This world isn't attacking Sigma males because they're villains. It's targeting them because they can't be bought, bullied, or broken. You don't rise by being louder. You rise by becoming unshakable. And that's what they fear. Not the lone wolf's teeth, but his calm. Not his aggression, but his control. Not his roar, but his refusal to play. So keep building in silence. Keep protecting your peace. Keep breaking every system that demands you shrink to fit in. If you're one of us, if you're an ascender, hit that subscribe button, not for attention, but to stay plugged into truth no algorithm can suppress. Until next time, stay sharp, stay private, stay Sigma.